In just 6 months, Ford actually had to recall like 11 million vehicles.
11 million.
Yeah, 11 million. And it wasn't because of a faulty factory robot or, a bad batch of steel or something. It was literally because they trusted an artificial intelligence to do a human engineer's job.
Right.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, we are cutting right through all that utopian tech hype to look at what actually happens when pristine technology, collides with physical limits and human behavior and just hard-earned institutional knowledge.
Yeah, because the narrative over the last 2 years has really been dominated by this assumption that if you can mathematically define a task, right, an algorithm can just do it perfectly.
Exactly.
But the sources we're diving into today, they prove we are hitting a massive reality check. I mean, from Detroit's factory floors to global silicon supply chains, all the way down to teenagers outsmarting national legislation.
Oh, we'll definitely get to the teenagers.
Yeah, the theoretical rubber is just hitting a very bumpy road for you and me.
For sure. And look, as a quick promise to you listening right now, we know your time is valuable. So today's mission is a highly condensed, rapid-fire analysis. We are cutting out all the fluff to deliver maximum insight in under 15 minutes.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Starting with that absolutely staggering number from Ford, 51 separate recalls,
Just massive.
covering 11 million vehicles in just the first half of 2026.
Yeah.
I look at that and I just think, how does a legacy automaker let that happen?
Well, it really comes down to a deliberate strategic shift that just completely backfired on them. They aggressively replaced their experienced engineers with AI-driven quality systems.
Right, on purpose.
Yeah. The thought process, which Charles Poon, their vice president of vehicle hardware engineering, actually admitted on the record, was that they thought they could just feed their design requirements into a generative AI model.
Okay.
And they assumed the AI would just, ingest those parameters and automatically spit out flawless product designs.
Wait, I'm really struggling with this. Are you telling me a multi-billion-dollar company essentially dumped their engineering manuals into a prompt box and just expected a perfect car to pop out?
That's essentially what happened, yeah.
It feels like hiring a brilliant but naive intern. Like they've memorized all the textbooks, they can quote the manual back to you, but they have absolutely zero street smarts.
Exactly.
Like they don't know what actually happens when a chassis built in 2018 hits a pothole at 60 miles an hour in the freezing rain.
Right, and that intern analogy really gets to the core of the problem here because AI models are trained on documented data, right?
Sure.
But so much of engineering is actually undocumented. It's institutional memory. In the auto industry, they actually call this knowing where the bodies are buried.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's that unwritten knowledge of how a specific software patch interacts with a legacy hardware platform or, how a minor compromise on a suspension part 3 years ago is going to trigger a warranty claim today. And AI doesn't have those scars.
So what did they do? Did Ford just admit defeat? Throw the servers out the window and go back to pen and paper?
Well, no, they didn't abandon the tech entirely. In fact, they expanded their AI usage to over 100,000 AI-powered tests.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but they realized the machines desperately need adults in the room. So they executed what the industry is now calling the AI boomerang.
The AI boomerang.
Yeah, Ford quietly went out and rehired about 350 veteran technical specialists, the folks they internally refer to as gray beards.
So they fired them, realized the AI couldn't actually do the job alone, and then brought them back.
Exactly.
What are these gray beards actually doing now?
So they're leading mandatory design reviews, but crucially, they are training the very AI systems that were originally supposed to replace them.
Ah.
The AI runs the massive simulations, does all the heavy lifting of data processing, and the graybeards provide the context and the street smarts to actually interpret those results.
Yeah.
And, the results speak for themselves. After integrating the humans back into the loop, Ford just topped the J.D. Power Initial Quality Survey for mass market brands.
That is a wild turnaround.
Yeah.
And I imagine for you listening right now, this isn't just about cars. If Ford is doing this, it has to be bleeding into other industries, right?
No, it's a massive corporate trend. Recent data actually shows that 44% of finance companies, 35% of HR departments, and 32% of tech companies are currently rehiring for positions they had previously eliminated for automation.
Wow.
They're buying the boomerang. Human pattern recognition, the kind you earn the slow, hard way, is the one thing you actually cannot automate.
Right. So AI isn't just failing to read the room in software design, it's physically hitting a wall in hardware, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we tend to think of AI as this, invisible floating cloud of intelligence. But it requires an enormous amount of physical material.
A staggering amount, yeah.
Yeah.
We're seeing this hidden physical cost to the whole AI data center boom. Simon Willison's blog actually highlighted this brilliant analysis by David Ox,
Okay.
and it details a massive memory shortage that is silently repricing everyday consumer electronics all around the globe.
Repricing consumer electronics.
Yeah.
Break it down the mechanics of that for me, because, my phone doesn't run the kind of chips that OpenAI uses to train a massive language model.
Right, but to understand this, we have to look at the silicon wafers themselves. There are only 3 remaining large memory manufacturers in the world.
Wait, only 3?
Just 3. And they have a hard, fixed capacity for how many silicon wafers they can process at any given time. It's a complete zero-sum game.
Okay.
They have to decide how to slice that limited pie. So you have standard DDR memory for regular desktops. You have LPDDR for the mobile phone you might literally be listening to this on. And then you have HBM, which is high bandwidth memory.
HBM being the, high-octane fuel for the massive NVIDIA GPUs training these AI models.
Exactly. Now, until recently, HBM accounted for just 2% of global wafer allocation. But with this AI data center explosion, that allocation is jumping to an expected 20% by the end of 2026.
Wow, 20%.
Yeah. And here is the mechanical bottleneck. HBM is incredibly complex to build. It uses advanced three-dimensional stacking.
3D stacking.
Yeah, where multiple memory chips are stacked vertically and connected by these microscopic wires called through-silicon vias.
Okay.
Because of that complex packaging, a single gigabyte of HBM requires more than 3 times the physical wafer capacity to produce compared to standard phone or laptop memory.
So here's where it gets really interesting for the listener. How exactly does a massive tech company buying servers for their new AI chatbot affect your ability to just buy a cheap phone?
It comes down to profit margins and just, well, historical survival. These memory companies have lived through brutal boom and bust cycles.
Well, sure.
They learned from past industry bloodbath that it's always better to under-provision your capacity than to over-provision and crash the market entirely.
Right.
And the profit margins on AI memory are incredibly high right now. So manufacturers are aggressively prioritizing HBM, eating up massive amounts of physical wafer space, and actively under-provisioning standard consumer RAM to keep those prices stable.
Wow, so they are actively choking the supply of regular memory just to chase the AI gold rush.
Yeah, and the invisible cost of that decision is that it's actively killing the sub-$100 smartphone market.
That's huge.
We might not notice it as much in wealthy Western markets, but cheap smartphones are absolutely vital infrastructure for hundreds of millions of people in regions like Africa and South Asia.
Yeah.
The digital divide is widening strictly because AI data centers are physically crowding out the components needed for affordable consumer tech.
It's literally a zero-sum game on a silicon wafer.
Exactly.
So, okay, AI is triggering labor boomerangs. It's causing massive hardware supply shocks. It makes perfect sense that governments are panicking, right, and trying to build guardrails.
Right.
But when you look at who is actually policing this, the reality check from the sources is that global regulation is just this completely disjointed, chaotic web.
It really is. It's a patchwork that forces multinational companies into a very, very complex compliance dance. Let's look at the major players here. The European Union has really stepped up to play the role of the strict parent.
Okay.
They've rolled out the EU AI Act, and it is entirely mandatory. And what's interesting is how it works mechanically. It sorts AI systems into 4 distinct risk tiers.
4 tiers.
Yeah, unacceptable, high, limited, and minimal.
So explain how those tiers actually function. Like, who decides what is unacceptable versus just high risk?
It's basically based on the application's impact on citizens' fundamental rights. So an unacceptable risk would be a government using AI for real-time biometric mass surveillance or social scoring.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Those are outright banned. High risk includes things like AI used in medical devices or evaluating job applications.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you build a high-risk system, you have to undergo rigorous testing, you have to maintain extensive documentation, and guarantee human oversight before it can even enter the EU market. And they back this up with massive fines.
How massive?
Up to 35 million euros or 7% of a company's global turnover.
7% global turnover. That is a massive stick.
It is.
Meanwhile, the United States looks like the Wild West by comparison.
There is currently no comprehensive federal AI law. And just to be entirely clear with you, the listener, as we discuss these shifting policies between the Biden and Trump administrations, we are not endorsing any political viewpoints here. We are simply reporting the policy facts as outlined in our source material.
Unnecessary clarification. And the
Yeah.
facts of the U.S. regulatory environment show a heavy lean toward prioritizing innovation over restriction.
The Trump administration rescinded the previous Biden executive order on AI, basically directing federal agencies to remove barriers to AI development rather than impose federal safety testing mandates.
But nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Mhm.
Because there's no federal baseline in the U.S., individual states are stepping in to write their own rules.
Exactly.
Like Colorado just enacted a comprehensive AI Act taking effect in 2026, and they're focusing heavily on algorithmic discrimination and things like hiring and housing.
Yeah.
California is passing its own targeted bills focusing on frontier model safety and election integrity. So it's just a patchwork.
Right, and then the sources detail Australia's approach, which is much softer. They're mostly relying on voluntary guidelines, kind of condensed into 6 core practices for responsible AI.
Just voluntary.
Mostly, yeah. You have a few localized mandates, like the New South Wales government requires reviews for high-risk projects, but overall, it's a very light touch compared to Europe.
Well, this brings up a huge logistical question for developers.
Well-
Our sources mention the EU's extraterritorial reach. So let's say I'm a small tech startup sitting in Texas or Sydney. I build a new AI tool. Do I seriously have to play by the EU's incredibly strict rules if I just happen to have like 1 or 2 European customers? It feels like one strict homeowners association setting the paint colors for the entire global neighborhood.
That HOA analogy is actually exactly what the EU is actively aiming for.
Really?
Yeah. They are using their massive market access as leverage. We saw them do the exact same thing with GDPR and data privacy.
Oh, right.
If you're a global company, it is incredibly inefficient and expensive to maintain one underlying AI architecture for Europe, a completely different one for Colorado, and a third for Australia.
Yeah, that'd be a nightmare.
So businesses naturally default to the highest common denominator for compliance. By writing the strictest mandatory laws, the EU is effectively forcing startups in Texas and Sydney to adopt their standards. They just become the de facto global regulator.
Wow. But let's push back on the very premise of these sweeping regulations for a second. You can write the strictest laws of the world. You can enforce the highest common denominator. But does any of this actually work when it collides with everyday human behavior?
That is the big question.
Can you actually engineer human compliance? Let's look at another major piece of tech legislation from the sources.
Right, and Australia is providing a fascinating real-time case study for this. They recently enacted the world's first national social media ban for anyone under the age of 16.
Yeah.
It legally prohibits minors from having accounts on platforms like TikTok, X, Instagram, Snapchat, all of them.
And on paper, that sounds like a massive, decisive victory for child safety online. The sources even point out that the UK is planning to roll out a similar ban in 2027 based on this exact model.
Right.
But the reality check hits the moment you look at the data from the ground. 3 months into the ban, researchers studied over 400 Australian teenagers. And the result, 85% of them are still using social media.
85%. It's just a masterclass in human circumvention.
Yeah.
The legislation entirely relied on age verification checks by the tech platforms to enforce the ban, but the study found those checks are completely inadequate. The mechanics of the ban just fall apart at the user interface.
How so?
Only between 5 and 11% of the teens were ever asked to provide an official photo ID.
Oh, wait, only 5 to 11%. So how are the rest of them getting in?
The vast majority of the time, bypassing a national law was as simple as checking a box that said, I am over 16, or uploading a generic selfie that an algorithm tries to guess the age of.
Oh, wow.
And even when the platforms try to be stricter, the kids just engineer their way around it. The data shows 15 to 19% of these young teens are just spinning up fake accounts.
Of course they are.
And 3% have already figured out how to route their connections through VPNs to mask their location entirely, making it look like they're logging in from New Zealand or the US.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Are governments just passing performative bans that teenagers can outsmart before they even finish their homework?
It really highlights this massive gap between policy intent and technological reality.
Yeah.
Child psychology and tech experts reviewing this data point out exactly why this policy is failing. A sheer ban might work to delay access for very young kids, say, those under 8 years old, whose parents are actively controlling their devices anyway.
Right, because the parents are the firewall there.
Exactly. But for adolescents, a blanket ban without a genuinely convincing, technically robust safety strategy simply does not improve outcomes. It doesn't reduce their screen time, and it definitely doesn't protect their mental health.
It just hides it.
Right, it just pushes their activity underground, which actually makes it harder for parents to monitor what they are doing.
Yeah, you can threaten the platforms with all the fines you want, but
Yeah,
you cannot legislate away a teenager's desire to connect with their peers.
you really can't.
Well, keeping things tight as promised, we're bringing our rapid-fire journey to a close here, well under the 15-minute mark.
Like to see it.
We've unpacked how Ford realized that all the algorithmic power in the world cannot replace the hard-earned, unwritten knowledge of human graybeards.
Right.
We explored how the complex 3D stacking of AI memory chips is eating up physical wafer space, quietly making cheap smartphones too expensive for the developing world. And we watched teenagers effortlessly bypass national legislation that was supposed to keep them offline.
A lot of reality checks today.
Definitely. And the overarching lesson for you, the listener, is that technology does not exist in a vacuum. It is entirely beholden to physical constraints, to disjointed global regulations, and frankly, deeply ingrained human realities.
And we spend so much time worrying about how AI and new technologies are going to rewrite the rules of humanity.
We really do.
But if humans are ultimately the bottleneck, whether it's the graybeards' institutional knowledge or the physical limitations of silicon supply chains or just stubborn teenage behavior, it raises an entirely different question for you to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
What happens when AI systems realize humans are the constraint and they start independently redesigning their own hardware or writing their own regulatory loopholes to bypass us entirely? Maybe human nature is the one thing technology will never actually be able to overwrite.
That's it, something to think about.